The story of sleeping in the universe. What is Parsec? Gentle science to help you sleep soundly. Tonight, you don't need to solve anything. You don't need to figure out the day, or replay any conversations, or tidy up any loose threads in your mind. Tonight can simply be a soft doorway, an unhurried step away from the brightness of screens and the sharp edges of schedules, and into a darker, gentler room where time moves differently. Imagine the world outside your window, wherever you are listening from, settling into its nighttime rhythm. Streetlights glow with a patient hush. A distant car passes like a slow wave, then fades. Somewhere, a building hums quietly in the background, the way a sleeping city breathes. Even if you live in a place that never fully quiets, there is still a softness that arrives after dark, the subtle lowering of the world's shoulders. And above it all, beyond roofs and clouds and airplanes and the little stories of daily life, there is the sky. Not a sky that demands attention, just a sky that waits. The stars don't rush. They don't need you to keep up. They don't ask you to memorize their names or calculate their distances. They simply shine patiently, calmly, whether you are wide awake or already drifting. So let yourself become a little more comfortable. If it feels good, allow your jaw to loosen. Let your tongue rest gently behind your teeth. Let your shoulders sink a fraction lower. And if you'd like, take a slow breath in and let it out as if you're releasing a handful of worry into the dark. Good. Tonight, we're going to explore one of astronomy's most peculiar choices. Not as a lesson, not as a test, but as a bedtime story. It's the story of how humans learned to measure the deep distances of space, not with a ruler, not with a rope, not with anything you could hold in your hands, but with the tiniest shift of a star, barely perceptible, like a whisper in the corner of your vision. It's a story about a word that sounds almost playful, Parsec, a word that has traveled through science books, through films, through the mouths of people who love the night sky, and still, somehow, it remains a little mysterious. But in this story, you don't have to understand Parsec. You only have to feel it, the way you might feel the steady rhythm of waves in the dark, without counting them. And if this voice feels like a place you've been before, you can always return here again, whenever the night feels long. Now, when was the last time you looked up at the night sky and felt at peace? You don't have to answer out loud. You don't even have to answer clearly. Just let your mind wander for a moment, to a time when the night felt friendly. Maybe it was years ago, on a porch or a balcony, the air cool against your skin, the smell of trees or distant rain. Maybe it was a night drive, the sky opening above the highway like a wide black ocean. Or maybe it was a single quiet moment, you stepping outside for a breath and realizing the stars were still there, doing what they've always done. There's something reassuring about that, because the stars are older than our worries. And yet, for most of human history, we didn't know how far away they were. We could see them, we could give them shapes, turn them into stories, steer ships by them. We could watch them rise and set, watch the seasons rotate like a slow turning wheel. But the distance, the depth, the true scale of the sky, that remained out of reach, not because humans weren't smart enough, not because they didn't try, but because the universe is patient, and it asks us to become patient, too. So let's step back in time, not to a dramatic moment, not to a loud discovery, but to a quieter era, when darkness was darker than it is now, and a night sky could look like a velvet dome scattered with icy sparks. Picture a small town at the edge of fields. The air is crisp. There is no glowing skyline, no constant wash of light. The stars are immense, And somewhere, perhaps on a hill, there is a simple observatory, not a grand palace of science, just a building built for stillness. Inside, a telescope rests like a long sleeping animal, its metal cool, its glass waiting. The floorboards creak softly under careful footsteps. A lantern may glow, low and amber, kept dim on purpose so the night vision remains intact. And there is a person there, not a hero in a cape, not a dramatic genius in a whirlwind, just a human being with a calm persistence, someone who has learned how to sit with the unknown without being frightened by it. He returns night after night, not chasing excitement, but keeping a quiet appointment with the sky. The work is slow, the kind of slow that modern life rarely allows. He adjusts his instruments carefully. He watches, he writes, he waits, and then he does it again, night after night after night. It can feel almost like meditation, because when you stare into the dark long enough, you begin to understand something simple. The universe does not hurry for anyone, and maybe neither do you have to hurry tonight. Now, here's the gentle curiosity at the center of our story. For centuries, people imagined the stars fixed in place like gems pinned to a crystalline ceiling. A beautiful idea, a comforting one. The sky as a stable structure, unchanging and orderly. The kind of cosmic promise that says, no matter what happens below, the heavens remain steady. And for a long time, that idea felt true. The constellations held their shapes, the patterns stayed familiar, human lives came and went beneath them like brief candle flames. But then, slowly, quietly, a different thought began to form. What if the stars weren't pinned to anything? What if they were suns, distant, vast, separate, each one with its own space around it? If that were true, then distance mattered. And once distance matters, the mind begins to ask a very human question. How far? Not urgently, not anxiously, just curiously. The way you might wonder how far the ocean goes when you're standing on the shore at night. So people tried to measure. They tried with clever geometry, with careful records, with instruments that became more refined over time. And still, the distances remained stubbornly hidden, because if the stars are truly far, so far that even the entire orbit of Earth around the Sun is a tiny baseline, then the shift you're looking for is unimaginably small, smaller than a grain of sand held at arm's length, smaller than the thickness of a hair, smaller than what the eye wants to admit is even possible. And yet, the universe leaves a clue, a soft one. A clue built into the fact that we move. Here is a gentle way to feel it. Hold your hand up in front of you, if you're awake enough to do so. If not, just imagine it. Lift one finger. Keep it still. Now, imagine looking at that finger with just your left eye, then just your right. The finger appears to shift slightly against the background, not because it moved, but because you changed your position. That tiny shift, so ordinary, so human, is called parallax. It's how your brain senses depth. It's how you know a doorway is farther than your hand. It's how the world becomes three-dimensional. And one night, long ago, humans realized they could use that same gentle trick to measure the sky. If Earth moves around the sun, then we view the stars from different positions throughout the year. And if a star is close enough in astronomical terms, then it should appear to shift slightly against the far background of more distant stars. Not much, not dramatically, just a small, slow sway, like a lantern seen from a moving boat. The star would trace a tiny shape over months, a delicate, nearly invisible ellipse. And if you could measure that shift, you could finally estimate distance. The first time someone truly managed to do this, it was not like fireworks. It was more like hearing a quiet click as a door finally opens. A soft confirmation, and so that's how far. And this is where our story begins to gather its warm momentum. Because to measure such a tiny shift, you need more than intelligence. You need patience so deep, it becomes a kind of devotion. You need to be willing to repeat the same action until repetition becomes peace. You need a mind that can sit with the smallest details, without frustration, without drama, just steady attention. Our astronomer, this gentle figure in the observatory, keeps returning to one particular star, not because it is the brightest, not because it is the most famous, but because it is suitable for the kind of quiet measurement he hopes to make. A star that sits, night after night, in its place, waiting to be noticed in a new way. Outside, seasons pass. In one month, the air might smell like wet earth. In another, frost might form on the edge of windows. Sometimes, the sky is clear and generous. Sometimes, it is clouded, withholding its view. And on those nights, he simply waits, not angry, not defeated, just accepting that nature has its own rhythm. There is something deeply comforting about that kind of acceptance, because so much of life feels like it asks us to force outcomes. But the sky doesn't respond to force. It responds to time. It responds to calm attention. And in a way, tonight's story is also doing that for you. It's offering you a rhythm that does not demand anything. A rhythm you can sink into the way you sink into a warm bed. So, if you notice your mind racing, let it race for a moment. Then imagine it gently slowing, like footsteps fading down a hallway. No need to push thoughts away. Just let them drift to the edges, like clouds thinning. Now, our astronomer begins to compare the position of that chosen star to others nearby stars that are so far away they do not seem to move at all. He notes, again and again, where the star appears. At first, it seems steady, almost stubborn, but he is not looking for a large change. He is looking for a soft one, and over months, a whisper of movement begins to appear. Not enough to excite a crowd, but enough to satisfy a careful heart. The star is shifting, tiny, slow, cyclical, like a pendulum that takes half a year to swing one way and half a year to swing back. In that small motion, something profound is revealed, because the shift is not just a measurement. It is a sign that Earth is moving. A sign that the stars are not pinned to a dome. A sign that space has depth. That the night sky is not a ceiling, but an ocean. And once you accept that, the mind naturally becomes quieter in a strange and soothing way. Because what are your worries, really, compared to an ocean of stars? Not in a dismissive way. Your worries matter because you matter. But in a gentle, rebalancing way, a way that says, you do not have to carry everything tonight. The universe is carrying its own enormous rhythm, steady and slow, and you are allowed to rest inside it. Now, let the word Parsec float into the room. It sounds like a small, simple thing, almost like a step or a soft tap. And that's fitting, because a parsec is not a natural object in space. It's not a mountain. It's not a star. It is a human choice. A way of telling the distant story in a convenient language. A parsec is tied to parallax, tied to that gentle shift. It's as if humans said, let's name the distance at which a star shifts by a certain tiny amount when we view it from opposite sides of Earth's orbit. Not because the universe demanded it, but because humans needed a way to speak about vastness without being overwhelmed by it. And isn't that what we do in life, too? We choose names and measurements and routines. We create small structures so we can live inside something manageable. We do it with calendars, with clocks, with traditions, with familiar mugs in the morning and familiar blankets at night. None of it is the universe's law. It's just our gentle way of making meaning. And here comes a soft thought you can carry like a warm stone. Sometimes what lasts the longest is not what is perfect. Sometimes what lasts is simply what is useful enough, gentle enough, familiar enough to keep being passed from one person to the next. A word, a unit, a quiet tradition, a lullaby, a story. And this story tonight will not ask you to memorize definitions. It will only invite you to walk slowly beside that idea, that we measure the unimaginable with something as simple as a shift between two viewpoints, two eyes, two seasons, two positions along a slow orbit. Now, before we move farther into the observatory, before we let the night deepen, let's plant a small, calm seed of curiosity, because our astronomer, watching that tiny sway of a star, begins to realize something else. If you can measure one distance, you can begin to map the sky. And if you can map the sky, then the universe becomes not just a ceiling of lights, but a place with shape, with neighborhoods, with depth, with pathways. And somewhere in that unfolding sense of shape, there is an even quieter mystery waiting. A mystery about time, because the light reaching his eye is old. It left the star long ago, traveling patiently through darkness until it arrived at this moment to meet him in the lens of his telescope, which means, in a gentle way, he is looking at the past. And so are you, whenever you look at the stars. And that raises a question, soft as a blanket settling. What if the most comforting thing about the universe is not how big it is, but how patient it is? What if the light itself is a kind of quiet messenger, saying, I took my time to get here, and I still arrived? Hold that thought loosely. You don't need to solve it. Just let it hover as the night grows deeper. Because in the next part of our journey, we will stay with this astronomer a little longer, through his slow nights, through the gentle discipline of attention, and we'll let the meaning of Parsec open like a flower that doesn't rush. And as we do, we'll also let something else happen. We'll let your own mind, busy from the day, begin to move the way the stars move in our story. Slowly, subtly, cyclically, returning you, bit by bit, to a calmer center. If tonight's story already reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below only if you want to. Here, no one rests alone. Every story is a soft lantern in the dark. And now, as the observatory lamp dims, and the telescope points again toward that patient star, we'll continue. The night deepens, almost without notice. It doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in gently like ink, spreading through water, until the world feels wrapped in a softer outline. Colors lose their sharp edges. Sounds travel farther, but arrive more quietly. Even time seems to loosen its grip, stretching and thinning, as if it, too, has decided to slow down. Inside the observatory, the air is cool and steady. The lantern burns low now, its flame carefully trimmed. Shadows rest along the curved walls, unmoving. The telescope points upward, patient and familiar, aligned once again with the same small region of sky. Our astronomer is here again, not because tonight promises a breakthrough, not because anything dramatic is expected, but because this is what he does. He shows up. Night after night, he steps into the same quiet posture, hands steady, breath even, attention gently placed on something far beyond himself. There is a particular peace in repetition when it is chosen freely. The modern world often treats repetition as something to escape from routine, as a cage. But in this place, repetition becomes a refuge. Each night is similar, yet never identical. The stars shift their angles. The air carries different scents. Sometimes the sky is generous. Sometimes it withholds itself behind clouds. And all of it is accepted, because patience, when practiced long enough, becomes a kind of friendship with time. If you're listening now, perhaps with your lights dimmed, perhaps already lying down, you might feel that same gentle repetition in your own body. The slow rise and fall of your breath, the familiar weight of gravity holding you to the bed or chair beneath you. The quiet reminder that nothing is required of you in this moment. You don't have to move forward. You don't have to improve. You don't even have to stay awake. Just as the astronomer keeps his quiet appointment with the stars, you are keeping a quiet appointment with rest. Outside, the sky appears unchanged to any casual glance. The constellations hold their shapes, just as they always have. Familiar patterns drift westward as Earth turns, unseen and unannounced. To most people, the stars look like fixed points, decorations, pinned to darkness. But the astronomer knows better now. He knows that beneath that apparent stillness, something subtle is happening. And so, with careful hands, he begins his work again. He aligns the telescope with a particular star, one that does not stand out to the naked eye. It doesn't blaze like Sirius. It doesn't demand attention. It is modest, faint, easy to overlook, which makes it perfect. He records its position relative to other stars nearby. He writes notes in a steady script, not rushing, not embellishing. The ink dries slowly on the page. There is no audience. No applause waiting at the end of the night, only the quiet satisfaction of having paid attention. This kind of work requires a certain temperament, one that finds meaning not in quick rewards, but in continuity. And perhaps that is why it feels so comforting to listen to now. Because many people listening tonight are tired, not just physically, but in a deeper way. Tired of urgency. Tired of being measured by speed, tired of days that seem to demand constant reaction. And here, in this story, nothing is urgent. The universe is not in a hurry, and neither are you. Night after night, the astronomer repeats his measurements. He notices how the star's position changes almost imperceptibly over weeks, then months. It is not something you could see by glancing up casually. It reveals itself only through comparison, through patience, through the willingness to trust that small differences matter, even when they arrive slowly. This is where time becomes an ally. And perhaps you can feel that now, too. Time, when it slows down, stops feeling like something that chases you. Instead, it becomes something that carries you. The seasons begin to turn. The air grows warmer, then cooler again. The constellations of winter give way to those of summer. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a pale river, its light faint but persistent. The astronomer's routine remains unchanged. He does not rush to conclusions. He does not announce success prematurely. He simply keeps watching, and slowly, so slowly, that it feels almost like nothing at all, the star begins to reveal its secret. Across the span of Earth's orbit, the star does not remain fixed against the distant background. It shifts, just a little, just enough, like a quiet nod from the universe. This shift is not dramatic. It does not flare or flash. It does not announce itself with excitement. It traces a tiny path, an ellipse so small it could fit comfortably inside the dot at the end of a sentence. But that path carries meaning. because it tells a story about distance, a story about perspective, a story about how movement, when observed patiently, reveals depth. And this is where the idea of Parsec begins to take shape, not as a formula, not as a rigid definition, but as a gentle agreement between humans and the cosmos. A parsec is born from this quiet observation. It is a way of saying, here is a distance at which this tiny shift appears. Nothing more, nothing less. It is not a boundary in space. It is not a wall or a milestone placed by nature. It is simply a name we give to a relationship between motion and perception, between where we are and what we see. There is something deeply human about that. We do the same thing in our own lives. We measure progress not by absolute distances, but by subtle changes. A feeling that hurts a little less than it did last month. A memory that no longer feels sharp, but softened. A worry that shifts just enough to let us breathe again. These are not dramatic victories. They are quiet movements, parallaxes of the heart, and they matter. The astronomer does not celebrate loudly when he confirms the shift. There is no sudden triumph, just a deep, steady satisfaction, because the discovery does not feel like conquest. It feels like listening and finally hearing. Now, let's pause here for a moment. If you'd like, take another slow breath in and let it out gently. Notice how your body feels now compared to when this story began. Perhaps your shoulders are lower. Perhaps your thoughts feel less insistent. Perhaps nothing has changed at all, and that's perfectly fine, too. Just like the stars' movement, calm often arrives subtly. Now, as the astronomer reflects on his measurements, he realizes something else. This distance, this parsec, is enormous, far beyond anything a person could travel, far beyond anything that feels intuitive. And yet, it is defined by something so small, a tiny angle, a shift that can barely be seen. This contrast is soothing in its own way. It reminds us that the vastness of the universe does not require grand gestures to be understood. Sometimes, the smallest details carry the greatest weight. Sometimes, the universe speaks in whispers. And when we listen closely enough, those whispers are enough. The astronomer writes the word down carefully. Parsec. He doesn't know yet that this word will persist, that it will be used by generations of scientists, that it will find its way into stories, films, conversations, that it will become part of the shared language of people who look up at the sky and wonder. He only knows that it works, that it allows him to describe something previously unreachable. And that is often how human knowledge grows, not through perfection, but through usefulness, through tools that are good enough to carry meaning forward. There is a gentleness in that realization, because it means we don't have to get everything right to be part of something lasting. We only have to contribute something that helps others see a little more clearly. The night continues. Outside, the stars do what they have always done. They shine. They send their light outward, indifferent to whether it will be noticed or named. Some of that light began its journey long before the astronomer was born, long before any of us were here. And now, it arrives quietly meeting glass and eye and mind. Light is patient. It does not rush. It does not complain about the distance. It simply travels until it reaches someone who is ready to receive it. There is a quiet comfort in that, because it suggests that even delayed things still arrive, even slow journeys still complete themselves, and maybe some of the things you've been waiting for, clarity, rest, peace, are also on their way, moving at a pace that feels right, even if it doesn't feel fast. The astronomer steps outside for a moment. The night air touches his face. The ground beneath his feet feels solid, familiar. Above him, the sky stretches endlessly. He knows now that the stars are not all equally distant. Some are neighbors, relatively close in the cosmic sense. Others are unimaginably far, so far that their parallax is too small to measure with his tools. This realization doesn't make the universe feel chaotic. It makes it feel layered, like a landscape with hills and valleys, near and far. And in that layered vastness, there is room for everything, including him, including you. If you listen closely, you might notice how this story is beginning to feel less like information and more like a rhythm. A slow, steady unfolding that is intentional, because sleep does not arrive through force. It arrives through permission. Permission to slow, permission to let go, permission to trust that nothing important will be missed if you rest. The astronomer returns inside. He extinguishes the lantern carefully. The observatory grows darker, quieter. The telescope remains pointed skyward, holding its place. And somewhere in that darkness, a thought settles gently. The universe does not measure us. We measure it. And even then, only softly, only approximately, only enough to feel connected. This is a comforting thought to carry into the night, because it means you are not being evaluated by the stars. You are simply sharing space with them, breathing under the same sky, existing in the same slow, patient continuum. As this part of our story comes to a close, allow your mind to rest in that idea. You don't need to understand Parsec. You don't need to remember the details. All you need to know is this: there are things unimaginably large, moving unimaginably slowly, and they have room for you exactly as you are. If this story has brought you even a small sense of calm, you're welcome to leave a gentle comment for yourself, or for others who might be listening in the same quiet hours. Here, no one rests alone, and in the next part of our journey, we will follow this idea of distance a little farther into the way humans learned to live comfortably with scales they could never fully grasp, and how that, too, can teach us something about rest. For now, let the night hold you. The night has settled into its deepest rhythm now. It's the kind of night where even thoughts begin to speak more softly, where the edges of the day blur and lose their urgency. Outside, the world continues its quiet routines. Clocks still tick, roads still stretch, clouds still drift, but none of it presses against you anymore. Here, in this story, time has widened, and within that widening, there is space to breathe. The observatory stands silent now, its lantern extinguished, its door gently closed against the cool air. The astronomer has gone home to sleep, carrying with him no sense of triumph, no rush to announce what he has seen, just a quiet, knowing one that will wait patiently until morning. Because discoveries like this do not demand immediate celebration. They ask to be absorbed, to be lived with, and in the years that follow, this quiet measurement, the soft sway of a star, the human decision to name a distance, begins to ripple outward, not loudly, not all at once, but the way calm understanding always spreads, through conversations, through notes passed between colleagues, through the slow accumulation of trust. Other astronomers hear about it, they test it, they repeat it, they find that it works, and gradually, without ceremony, Parsec becomes part of the shared language of the sky, a word that allows people to talk about immense distances without raising their voices, without losing their footing, without becoming overwhelmed. And this is where something interesting happens. Once humans begin to measure distance in this way, not as an abstraction, but as a gentle relationship between movement and perception, the universe changes its emotional texture. It does not become colder, it becomes more intimate, because when you can name something, you can hold it more gently. You can think about it without fear, and the night sky, once a vast unknowable ceiling, begins to feel like a place with contours, with structure, with neighborhoods of light separated by long, quiet stretches of dark. Imagine standing beneath that sky now, not as an observer armed with equations, but as a person who simply knows that some stars are nearer than others, that some of the light reaching your eyes tonight began its journey before you were born, while other light started its journey more recently. The sky becomes layered with time, and time, when it's layered like this, feels less sharp, less demanding. It becomes something you can drift through. This is an important moment in our story, not because anything dramatic happens, but because a subtle shift occurs in the human relationship with vastness. Distance is no longer terrifying. It becomes narrative, a story that can be told slowly, one parsec at a time. And maybe that's why this idea has stayed with us for so long. Because humans are not only creatures who calculate, we are creatures who tell stories to ourselves and to one another. We tell stories to make sense of long journeys. We tell stories to soften waiting. We tell stories so that time doesn't feel empty. And Parsec, in its own quiet way, is a story that says, here is how far something is, relative to where we stand. Not absolute, not final, just relative, just enough. There's something deeply comforting about relativity, because it means nothing exists in isolation. Everything is measured in connection, and connection, especially at night, feels like exactly what we need. If you're listening now, you may notice that your thoughts are beginning to drift more freely. Images may come and go. Memories may surface without explanation. That's perfectly natural. Nighttime has a way of opening gentle doors in the mind. So, let's follow one of those doors for a moment. Imagine a person, many years after our astronomer, lying on their back in a quiet field. The grass is cool. The air smells faintly of earth and leaves. Above them, the stars are scattered generously across the sky. This person is not measuring anything. They are not calculating parsecs. They may not even know the word. And yet, they are benefiting from it, because the stories they've heard about the universe, the books they've read, the documentaries they've watched, the quiet explanations passed down through generations all rest on that early patience, on that willingness to sit with small shifts, on that decision to name a distance gently, rather than demand mastery over it. This person looks up and feels something settle inside their chest, a sense of scale, not the kind that makes you feel small in a painful way, but the kind that makes your worries loosen their grip. Because when the universe becomes vast, your inner space can become vast too, and suddenly, the things that felt so tight during the day have room to breathe. This is the hidden gift of gentle science. Not the facts themselves, but the emotional permission they offer. Permission to step out of the center of everything. Permission to rest inside something larger. And that permission matters deeply for the kind of person listening to this story tonight. Someone who has lived long enough to know that life does not always move in straight lines. Someone who understands that healing rarely comes with fireworks. It comes quietly, in layers, in moments where nothing seems to happen, and yet something shifts. Just like a star, the word parsec continues its quiet journey. It becomes common in observatories, then in textbooks, then in conversations between people who love the night sky. It does not replace older ways of speaking about distance. It simply joins them. There is still the poetic language of light years, A light year, the distance light travels in 1 year, carries emotional weight. It feels romantic. A light year sounds like longing, like time stretched across space, and people continue to use it, especially when they want to feel the story of distance. Parsec, on the other hand, feels more practical, more grounded. It belongs to those who spend long nights measuring, comparing, refining, and both coexist peacefully. Neither is more true than the other. They are simply different lenses, different ways of telling the same vast story. This coexistence is important because it reminds us that knowledge does not have to erase beauty, and beauty does not have to reject understanding. They can live side by side, just as you can be tired and still curious, just as you can be calm and still deep. If you notice your breathing now, you may find it slower, not because you tried to slow it, but because your body sensed that it was safe to do so. That's the power of stories like this. They don't instruct, they invite, and your body, wise and ancient, knows how to respond. Now, let's return once more to the idea of light. Light is a traveler. It moves through space without hurry. It does not know where it will end up. It does not know who will receive it. It simply goes, and when it arrives after years, after centuries, it carries with it a memory of where it came from. In this way, every star you see is also a story from the past, a quiet message that says, I was here, and now you are seeing me. This realization doesn't need to feel heavy. It can feel reassuring, because it means that time does not erase everything. Some things endure, some things travel, some things reach us when we are ready. And perhaps some of the calm you are feeling right now is like that. Something that has been making its way toward you all day, all week, all year, waiting for this quiet moment to arrive. The astronomer long since gone now could not have known how far his quiet nights would reach. He could not have known that his patience would ripple into stories told at bedtime, that his careful measurements would become metaphors for rest. But that is often how the most meaningful things work. They are not built for attention. They are built for continuity. And continuity is what the universe excels at. Stars continue to burn. Planets continue to orbit. Light continues to travel. And you continue to breathe. Even when you're asleep, even when you let go. That's something worth trusting. Now, as this part of the story begins to settle, let's gently turn inward. Think about distance, not in space, but in your own life. There may be something that feels far away right now. A resolution, a sense of peace, a version of yourself that feels calmer, lighter. It might seem distant, almost unreachable, but remember how Parsec works. Distance is revealed not by rushing toward it, but by noticing small shifts over time, tiny changes in perspective, moments where things feel just a little different than they did before. Those moments add up, even when you're not watching closely, even when you're resting. And perhaps tonight, this story is one of those small shifts, a gentle parallax, a slight change in how you're holding the night. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to make it mean anything. Just let it be what it is. Now, the sky outside, real or imagined, remains steady. Stars continue their ancient patterns, some closer, some farther, all shining. And beneath them, humans continue to live their small, meaningful lives, to work, to rest, to wonder, to sleep. As we prepare to move into the next part of our journey, allow your thoughts to become even softer. You may not remember everything you've heard. That's okay. Sleep stories are not meant to be remembered. They are meant to be felt. If tonight's story has stirred a quiet memory, a night sky from your past, a moment of stillness, you're welcome to share it below. Or you can simply keep it to yourself, like a small lantern you carry inward. Here, no one rests alone. Every listener is part of this slow, shared orbit. And in the next part, we'll drift even farther into the emotional landscape of distance and time, exploring how vastness, when approached gently, becomes one of the greatest comforts we have. For now, let the stars keep watch, let the universe hold its steady rhythm, and let yourself rest inside it. By now, the night has fully claimed its place. Not the kind of night that feels heavy or pressing, but one that feels wide and forgiving. The sort of night where thoughts don't disappear, but they soften, where memories drift through the mind like slow-moving clouds, never colliding, never demanding explanation. Somewhere beyond walls and windows, the earth continues its quiet turning. You don't feel it. You don't need to. It happens anyway. And in that gentle, constant motion, there is something profoundly comforting. Our story follows that same motion, now slow, circular, unhurried. Because once humans learned to measure distance in the sky, something subtle began to change, not just in science, but in how people felt about the universe. The sky stopped being a flat backdrop. It became a depth, a layered place. And depth has an emotional quality to it. Think for a moment about standing at the edge of the ocean at night. You can't see how far it goes. You can't trace its end, but you can feel its vastness, and instead of frightening you, it often calms you. The worries you carried all day don't vanish. They simply feel smaller, less sharp, less urgent. The universe, once it revealed its depth, began to have that same effect. Distance measured gently, patiently became a source of perspective, not the kind that diminishes human life, but the kind that cradles it. Astronomers, poets, sailors, dreamers, all began to look up and sense that they were part of something immeasurably larger, and that this largeness was not hostile. It was quiet, steady, reliable, and that reliability matters deeply to the human nervous system, especially at night. Because when the world feels unpredictable, the mind looks for patterns that don't break. The orbit of Earth, the slow drift of stars, the dependable arrival of light that has traveled for years just to meet your eyes. These are patterns that hold, and Parsec, quietly, became part of that holding. It didn't shout its meaning. It didn't try to overwhelm. It simply sat there in the background, useful, steady, dependable, like a familiar word you don't think about anymore, but would miss if it disappeared. Imagine a classroom decades later. Not a loud one. A quiet room near the end of the day. The light outside has softened. Dust floats slowly through a sunbeam. A teacher speaks calmly about stars, about distance, not to impress, but to share. They mention Parsec in passing. No fanfare. Just another tool in the language of space. And the students listen not because they're trying to memorize, but because the idea itself feels strangely grounding. That the universe can be spoken about calmly, that vastness doesn't require panic, that it's okay not to grasp everything at once. Some of those students will forget the term. Others will remember it vaguely. A few will carry it forward into their own quiet fascination with the night sky. And all of them, whether they realize it or not, will benefit from the emotional shift that came before the knowledge. The shift from unknown and frightening to unknown and spacious. This is an important distinction. Fear tightens, space relaxes, and the universe, once allowed to be spacious, becomes a place you can rest your thoughts. If you notice your body right now, you may feel that same spaciousness beginning to appear. A little more room between thoughts, a little more space around worries. You don't have to push for it. It arrives when the mind feels safe. Now, let's return, gently, to the idea of time. Distance in space is inseparable from distance in time. Every parsec measured is also a span of waiting. Light does not arrive instantly. It takes time, patient, uncomplaining time. And that means the sky is a mosaic of different moments layered together. Some stars show us what they were like long ago. Some show us something closer to now. All of them coexist in the same view. And this layering of time offers a quiet lesson, because human life, too, is layered. You carry your past with you, not as a burden but as a depth. Memories from years ago still glow softly inside you. Moments of kindness, moments of learning, moments of loss that have smoothed at the edges over time. They're all still there, and yet you are here now, listening, breathing, resting. Time doesn't erase who you've been, it adds dimension. And that dimension, when viewed gently, becomes richness. This is something people often realize later in life, that the accumulation of years is not a weight, but a widening. And perhaps that's why stories about the universe resonate so deeply with people who have lived a while. They recognize the feeling, the sense that meaning doesn't come from speed. It comes from continuity, from staying, from allowing things to unfold at their own pace. Parsec, again, fits beautifully into this philosophy. It does not rush you toward the edge of the universe. It does not force comprehension. It simply says, here is one way to speak about faraway things. Take it or leave it. Use it when it helps. Set it down when it doesn't. That kind of gentleness is rare and precious. Now imagine the Earth again, continuing its orbit. 6 months on one side of the Sunday, 6 months on the other, back and forth, back and forth. This movement, so ordinary to us, is what makes parallax possible. It's what allows the universe to reveal its depth, which means that discovery is not always about moving forward. Sometimes it's about moving around, returning, revisiting, seeing the same thing from a slightly different angle. That idea applies to life, too. Sometimes the understanding you need doesn't come from a new experience. It comes from revisiting an old one, with softer eyes, with more patience, with the perspective time has given you. And perhaps tonight you are doing something similar, revisiting the idea of rest, of quiet, of letting go. Not as a novelty, but as a returning. Now, notice how this story has no villain, no crisis, no problem to solve. That's intentional, because the night doesn't need conflict. It needs reassurance. It needs rhythm. It needs reminders that some things are stable, even when others are not. The universe offers that stability. Not by being unchanging, but by changing predictably. Orbits repeat, light travels faithfully, distances remain what they are, and humans, small, thoughtful, creative, find ways to describe these things without needing to dominate them. That humility is part of what makes science soothing when it's told gently. It's not about control, it's about relationship. And relationships, when healthy, are calming. If your mind begins to wander now, that's a good sign. It means the story is doing its work. You may catch fragments of images, stars, dark fields, a slow-moving sky. Let them come and go. There is no need to hold on to anything. Now, let's imagine one more quiet scene. A person, older now, sitting outside late at night. Perhaps after a long day, perhaps after a long life. They don't feel the need to accomplish anything. They simply sit, they look up, they breathe. They know, at least loosely, that the stars are far away, that distances like parsecs exist. But mostly, they feel something simpler, they feel held. Held by the same universe that held them when they were younger. Held by the same slow motions that will continue long after they are gone. And instead of fear, this brings relief, because it means they don't have to manage everything. They don't have to carry the weight of time alone. The universe is doing its part, quietly, faithfully, just like tonight. As we begin to close this part of the story, allow yourself to sink even deeper into that feeling. The feeling of being supported by something vast and steady. You don't need to name it. You don't need to analyze it. Just let it be present. If you'd like, take one more slow breath. In, gently, and out, even more gently. Good. In the next part of our journey, we'll drift toward an even softer realization, one about how humans choose what to keep, what to name, and what to pass down, and how those choices, though small, can echo through centuries. For now, rest here, under the same sky, within the same rhythm. And remember, you don't have to go anywhere tonight. The universe is already with you. The night holds steady, not frozen, just steady, in the way a calm lake holds the moon's reflection. Nothing is strained, nothing is forced. The world simply continues, one quiet moment following another, like beads sliding gently along a string. If you're still listening, you may already feel that familiar heaviness in your limbs, the good kind. The kind that doesn't pull you down, but settles you in place. The kind that says, you're allowed to rest now. And in this softened state, it's a good moment to talk about something very small. Because sometimes, the smallest things are the ones that stay the longest. Parsec, after all, is not a grand invention. It's not a law of nature carved into the fabric of the universe. It's not something the stars asked for. It is, at its heart, a quiet human decision, a choice made by people who needed a way to speak gently about something unimaginably large. And somehow, that choice stayed. Think about how many ideas humans have created that faded almost immediately. Words that were used once or twice, then forgotten. Systems that seemed promising, then proved too awkward to keep. Tools that worked in theory, but never quite fit the hands that tried to use them. Most things disappear, but some things linger, not because they are perfect, not because they are elegant in every way, but because they are good enough, comfortable, familiar, easy to pass on. Parsec is one of those things. It stayed not because it dazzled, but because it quietly worked, and there is something deeply reassuring in that, because it means that lasting impact does not require brilliance. It requires gentleness. It requires usefulness. It requires the ability to be picked up, used, and set down again without friction. And isn't that what we hope for in our own lives? To leave behind something that doesn't demand effort from others, something that helps quietly, something that feels natural to hold. As the years passed, astronomers continued to refine their understanding of distance. Instruments became more precise, measurements grew more accurate, distances once guessed became clearer, and still, Parsec remained, not because it was the final word, but because it was a good one. It fit into the rhythm of how humans think. It bridged a gap between geometry and intuition, between motion and meaning, between the Earth's quiet orbit and the faraway stars. And in that bridging, it earned its place. Now, let's slow this down even more. Imagine a long table, worn smooth by generations of hands. On that table are books, not flashy ones, not books that shout for attention, just steady volumes, well used, well loved. Inside them are ideas that have traveled across decades, even centuries. Some ideas are bold, some are subtle, but all of them survived, because someone found them worth carrying forward. Parsec sits quietly among them, not as a headline, but as a footnote that became a foundation, and that tells us something gentle about time. Time does not always preserve what is loud. It preserves what integrates, what fits into the flow of daily use, what does not interrupt but supports. This applies not just to science, but to people, to moments, to memories. Often, the things that stay with us the longest are not the dramatic peaks. They are the quiet constants, the way someone listened without interrupting, the routine of an evening walk, the presence of a voice that felt safe, the knowledge that something steady existed, even when everything else felt uncertain. And perhaps that's why this story resonates at night, because night is when we are most aware of what stays. The distractions fall away, the noise recedes, and what remains is what truly matters. Now, let's consider another gentle layer. Parsec did not replace older stories of the sky. People didn't stop telling myths. They didn't stop seeing shapes in the stars. They didn't stop naming constellations after heroes, animals, dreams. Science did not erase poetry. It simply joined it, and that coexistence is important, because humans do not live on facts alone. We live on meaning, on feeling, on stories that help us locate ourselves in the dark. Parsec offered a quiet kind of meaning. It didn't tell you what to feel about the universe. It simply gave you a way to talk about its depth without being overwhelmed. And that restraint, that humility, is part of why it endured. Now, if you're listening closely, you may notice that this story keeps circling back to the same ideas: distance, time, patience, small shifts. That repetition is not accidental. Repetition is how the mind relaxes. When we know where a story is going, even vaguely, we don't need to stay alert. We can let ourselves sink into the rhythm, just like the astronomer returning to the same star, just like Earth returning to the same place in its orbit, just like your breath, returning again and again, without effort. So let's circle once more. Long ago, humans looked up and felt small, not in a comforting way. In a disorienting way, the sky felt unreachable, unmeasurable, and that uncertainty carried a quiet fear, because the unknown, when it feels infinite, can feel threatening. But slowly, patiently, that feeling shifted, not because the universe became smaller, but because humans found ways to relate to it, ways to speak about it without shouting, ways to hold its vastness without being crushed by it. Parsec was one of those ways. It said, you don't need to understand everything. You just need a reference point, something steady to stand on while you look outward. And perhaps tonight, that's what you're doing too, standing on something steady. A bed, a chair, a familiar voice, a story that doesn't demand anything from you. While your thoughts look outward, then inward, then slowly begin to settle. Now imagine this. A person sits down to write late at night. They are not writing for recognition. They are not trying to change the world. They are simply putting words together in a way that feels honest, gentle, clear. They don't know who will read it. They don't know when. They don't know if it will matter. And yet, years later, someone finds those words at the right moment, in the right state of mind. And those words help, not dramatically, just enough. That is how Parsec works. That is how this story works. That is how many of the most important things in life work. They are created without urgency. They endure without noise. And they help without demanding recognition. There is a quiet dignity in that. And dignity is calming. especially when the world feels loud. Now, let's bring this back to you gently. You may not think of your own choices as significant. You may feel that the small things you do each day disappear into routine. But consider this: the habits you keep, the kindnesses you offer quietly, the way you choose to slow down when you could rush. These things may not feel dramatic, but they are the kinds of things that stay. They shape the emotional climate around you. They become reference points for others. They create a sense of safety, often without being noticed. Just like Parsec, and just like the stars, which shine whether or not anyone is watching. The night continues to hold us. Outside, Earth completes another fraction of its orbit. No fanfare, no announcement, just motion, steady and reliable. And somewhere far beyond, light continues its journey. Some of it will arrive tomorrow night. Some of it will arrive long after we are gone. And all of it moves without hurry, without judgment, without demand. If your eyelids feel heavy now, that's okay. You don't have to fight it. Stories like this are meant to be left unfinished in the mind. They do their work even when you're not fully aware of it. If you wake later and don't remember where you drifted off, that's a success. Because rest is not about memory, it's about release. Before we move on, take a moment, if you're still awake, to notice something simple. The way your body is supported, the way the surface beneath you holds your weight without effort, the way gravity does the work so you don't have to. This, too, is a kind of quiet agreement between you and the world, one that has been in place your entire life, reliable, unassuming, constant. As this part of the story begins to fade into the background, remember this gentle truth: what stays is often what is soft enough to be carried forward. You don't need to be extraordinary. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be present in your own quiet way. In the next part of our journey, we'll drift into an even deeper layer of the night, into the way time itself begins to feel different when we stop measuring it by urgency and start feeling it as a companion. For now, let yourself be held by the stillness. Let the small choices rest, and let the night continue its patient work. At this hour, time no longer feels sharp. It doesn't prod you forward. It doesn't divide itself into urgent pieces. It simply flows wide and quiet, like a river seen in moonlight, its surface smooth enough to reflect the sky without distortion. This is the hour when clocks still exist, but they no longer matter. Somewhere, seconds continue to tick. Minutes still pass. But here, in the softened space of the night, time becomes something else entirely. It becomes atmosphere, and this is where our story gently turns inward again. Because once humans learned to speak calmly about vast distances, once words like Parsec settled into the language of the sky, something subtle happened to their relationship with time as well. Distance and time are always intertwined. You cannot think about one without touching the other. Every measurement of space is also a story about waiting, about patience, about trust. Light traveling across a parsec does not rush. It does not accelerate to impress. It moves at its constant pace, carrying its quiet message across darkness, year after year, until it arrives. And when it does arrive, it is never late. It comes exactly when it comes. There is a profound comfort in that, because so much of modern life tells us that timing is everything, that being late means failure, that waiting means falling behind. But the universe offers a different perspective. It suggests that some journeys cannot be hurried and do not need to be. And perhaps tonight, your body is beginning to remember that truth. As the story unfolds slowly, without sharp turns, or sudden demands. Your nervous system recognizes a familiar rhythm, one older than deadlines, older than calendars, the rhythm of cycles, of orbits, of return. Think again of Earth's path around the Sunday, not as a race, not as a schedule, but as a gentle loop, a returning. Every year, Earth comes back to nearly the same place, not exactly the same, but close enough to feel familiar. And this repetition does not feel boring. It feels reassuring, because return implies continuity. It implies that nothing essential has been lost. Time, in this sense, is not an arrow shooting forward. It is a spiral, and spirals are kind. They allow revisiting. They allow understanding to deepen slowly. They allow healing to happen in layers. This is something many people only come to appreciate later in life, when they notice that the lessons that matter most repeat in different forms, at different times, until one day they settle gently into place. Just like the idea of distance settled into astronomy, not all at once, but gradually, through repetition and trust. Now, imagine someone sitting alone, late at night. Not lonely, just alone. The house is quiet. The world outside has gone still. They are not thinking about parsecs or stars, but they are thinking about time, about how quickly years seem to pass, and yet how long individual days can feel, about moments that slipped by unnoticed, and others that seem to echo forever. And as they sit there, breathing in the quiet, something shifts. They realize that time has not been chasing them. They have been chasing time. And in that realization, there is relief. Because if time is not an enemy, then rest is not surrender. It is alignment. The astronomers who worked with concepts like Parsec understood this intuitively. Their work required them to let go of urgency, to accept that some answers unfold only when observed across years, to trust that small changes, faithfully recorded, would eventually reveal a larger truth. That kind of trust reshapes your relationship with time. It teaches you to wait without anxiety, to observe without forcing, to let meaning arrive when it's ready. And this is the same skill that allows sleep to arrive naturally. Sleep cannot be summoned. It must be invited. And invitations work best when they are gentle. So if you are still awake now, listening quietly, that's perfectly fine. There is no rush to sleep. The story will not be offended. The night is patient, and patience is contagious. Notice how the pace of this story mirrors the pace of the universe it describes. There are no sudden jumps, no demands for attention, only a steady unfolding. This is intentional, because the mind learns best through imitation. When it hears slowness, it becomes slow. When it hears calm, it becomes calm. When it hears safety, it begins to let go. Now, let's consider something else about time. We often think of the past as something behind us, and the future as something ahead. But in the universe, time is layered. Light from distant stars shows us the past directly, not as memory, but as presence. That means the past is not gone. It is still traveling, still reaching, still touching the present. And perhaps this offers a comforting way to think about your own past, not as something you left behind, but as something that has contributed to the light you carry now. Your experiences, both joyful and difficult, have shaped the way you see. They have given you depth, and that depth is not a burden. It is a dimension. Just like distance in space adds richness to the sky, time adds richness to you. And when you allow yourself to rest, you are not escaping time. You are inhabiting it more fully. The night invites this kind of inhabiting. It softens the edges of memory. It blurs the sharp lines between then and now. It allows everything to exist together, without conflict. This is why nighttime reflection often feels different from daytime thinking. In the day, the mind organizes. At night, it integrates. And integration is gentle work. Now, imagine the light from a star several parsecs away. It began its journey long ago. It passed through empty space, unbothered by obstacles. It did not know who would see it. It did not know when. And yet, it traveled faithfully. This kind of faithfulness is not dramatic. It is quiet, and quiet faithfulness is one of the most calming forces there is, because it does not ask anything from you. It simply exists. If you find yourself thinking about things you wish you had done differently, about choices you would change, let those thoughts pass like distant stars. They are part of the sky, but they are not the whole sky. There is room for them, and room beyond them. And tonight, the room is wide. Time is not asking you to resolve anything. It is simply offering itself as a container, a place where everything can rest together, without judgment. The astronomers who worked slowly with the sky understood this kind of container. Their nights were long, often solitary, often quiet, and in that quiet, time stretched. It became something they lived inside, rather than something that pushed them forward. This allowed them to see patterns that hurried eyes would miss. Tiny shifts, subtle cycles, gentle truths, and perhaps that is what you are experiencing now. Not a breakthrough, not a revelation, just a softening, a loosening of the grip, a feeling that there is more room than you thought. This is enough. You do not need more. As we near the end of this part of the story, let's return to the simplest rhythm of all. Your breath. It has been with you the entire time. Inhaling, exhaling, without instruction, without commentary, just steady, just faithful, just present. Breath does not measure time in hours or years. It measures it in moments. And those moments are always now. This is where rest lives. Not in the future, not in resolution, but here, in this breath, in this quiet, in this moment when nothing is required. If you like, allow your next breath to be slightly slower, not forced, just a little more spacious. And as you exhale, imagine releasing the idea that you must keep track of anything at all. The universe is keeping track for you. It knows how to move. It knows how to wait. It knows how to return, and you are allowed to follow that example. In the next part of our journey, we will drift into the final layers of the night, into the way meaning gently dissolves into feeling and how. Eventually, even stories learn when to grow quiet. For now, let time be soft. Let distance be gentle. Let yourself rest inside the wide, patient rhythm that has always been here. At some point in the night, something subtle happens. It's not an event you can point to. There's no clear moment where you can say, now it begins. Instead, it's like the slow settling of dust after a long day, particles drifting downward until the air becomes clear again. This is the hour when the night stops asking questions. It simply holds. If you're still listening, your body likely understands this already. Muscles soften without being told. Thoughts lose their edges. Even curiosity becomes quieter, not gone, just resting. And that's exactly where this story wants to meet you now. Not in explanation, not in discovery, but in holding. Because the universe, when viewed without urgency, does not overwhelm. It cradles. And that may sound like a strange word to use for something so vast. But vastness and gentleness are not opposites. In fact, sometimes the largest things are the most forgiving. Think of the ocean again. Its size does not make it tense. It makes it rhythmic. Think of the sky. Its endlessness does not shout, it listens. And the night, this particular night, has learned how to do the same. Long ago, before humans named distances, before they spoke of parsecs or light years, the night was already doing its work. It was already offering rest, already slowing breath, already giving minds a place to set down the day. Science did not replace that function. It simply joined it. It added a layer of understanding, not to wake us up, but to help us feel safer inside the dark. Because fear often comes from what feels unmeasured, uncontained, unknown, and gentle measurement done with humility has a way of turning fear into familiarity. Parsec did that, quietly. It did not shrink the universe. It made room inside us. And now, as the story begins to drift away from facts and into feeling, you may notice that your attention no longer needs direction. It wanders where it wants. This is good. This is how rest deepens. Let's imagine something simple. A window at night, behind the glass, a room dimly lit or maybe completely dark. In front of the glass, the sky. You don't need to identify stars. You don't need to know their names or distances. You just see points of light, some brighter, some softer, all steady. That steadiness sends a quiet message to the nervous system, a message older than language, a message that says, you are safe enough to sleep. The astronomers we've followed in this story, those patient observers of small shifts, spent countless nights beneath that same message. And even though their minds were active, calculating, comparing, their bodies still responded to the night. Their breath still slowed, their thoughts still softened between notes. Because no amount of thinking can override the body's ancient relationship with darkness and stars. And that relationship is not anxious, it is intimate. Humans evolved under the night sky. For most of our history, darkness did not mean isolation. It meant gathering, firelight, quiet voices, shared silence, looking up together. And even now, when many of us live under artificial light, that ancient memory still lives in the body. It awakens when the lights dim, when voices soften, when stories slow down. You may feel it now, not as a thought, but as a sensation, a feeling of being less alone, even in solitude, because the night holds more than just you. It holds countless sleepers, countless listeners, countless lives unfolding quietly in parallel. And above all of them, the same sky, the same patient stars, the same distances, vast, unchanging, and unconcerned with our small anxieties. There is comfort in that unconcern, because it means you are not being judged, you are not being measured, you are simply being. Now, let's return briefly, very briefly, to the idea of distance, not to analyze it, just to feel it. A parsec is far, very far, too far to imagine in any literal way, and yet it is defined by something close, by Earth's orbit, by the distance between two viewpoints that are intimately familiar to us. That contrast between the familiar and the unimaginable is what makes the idea gentle. It bridges the personal and the cosmic, and that bridge is where meaning often lives. You don't need to understand the universe in its entirety to feel connected to it. You only need one stable place to stand, one reference point, one familiar rhythm. For the astronomer, it was Earth's slow orbit. For you, tonight, it might be the steady weight of your body resting, the familiar sound of this voice, the knowledge that nothing else is required of you right now. These are enough. The night does not ask you to expand infinitely. It asks you to settle, to allow the mind to do what it does naturally when it feels safe, which is to drift. you may notice that images are becoming less clear now, more abstract, less narrative. That's intentional. Stories, like music, know when to step back. They don't push toward conclusions at night. They fade, because fading is not loss, it is transition. Think of how stars fade at dawn. They don't disappear all at once. They soften, they yield the sky gradually, and no one mourns them, because we trust they will return. This trust is essential. It allows us to let go without fear, and sleep depends on that same trust. Trust that consciousness can loosen and still come back. Trust that rest is not an ending, just a pause. The universe pauses all the time, between breaths of stars, between orbits, between moments of light, and those pauses are not empty. They are full of quiet continuity. Now imagine the astronomer again, older now, perhaps, standing outside one last time, not to measure, not to record, just to look. He knows now that his work will continue without him, that others will use the tools he helped shape, that words like Parsec will persist, not because of his name, but because they fit. And that knowledge does not make him anxious, it comforts him, because it means he was part of something that didn't need constant maintenance, something that could hold itself. This is a deep kind of peace, the kind that comes when you realize you don't have to oversee everything, that the world and the universe has its own momentum, and that momentum is not hostile. It is simply large, and largeness, when it is steady, becomes shelter. If you're still awake now, you may feel a sense of sinking, not falling, sinking, as if the surface beneath you has become more supportive, as if gravity has grown kinder. This is your body letting go of unnecessary tension. It knows the story is not going to demand a sudden response. It knows the night is stable, and it responds accordingly. Let that response happen. There is nothing to do now. A gentle reminder, one that does not require action. Here, no one rests alone. Even if you are physically alone in your room, you are part of a quiet community tonight. People in different places, different time zones, different lives, listening to the same story, breathing in similar rhythms, letting go in similar ways, and above all of you, the same vast universe, measured gently, named softly, holding without effort. If this story has brought you calm, you can leave a gentle comment for yourself, not to engage, not to perform, just as a small marker of presence, a quiet, I was here, I rested. But even that is optional, because rest does not require proof. As we approach the final layers of the night, the story will continue to thin. Meaning will dissolve into feeling. Feeling will dissolve into quiet. And quiet will dissolve into sleep, if that is what your body wants. In the next part, we'll allow the last threads of narrative to loosen completely, until all that remains is rhythm, breath, and the sense of being safely carried by something vast and patient. For now, let the night hold you. Let the universe keep its distance and its closeness, and let yourself drift, knowing nothing is waiting for you on the other side of this moment. There comes a moment in every long night when stories start to grow quieter, not because they are finished, but because they sense that their work has been done. This is that moment. The night no longer needs explanation. The universe no longer needs description. Even the idea of distance parsecs, stars, light traveling patiently through darkness, can begin to soften, like words written in sand as the tide comes in. If you are still listening, you may notice that it feels harder to follow a single thread of thought. That is not a problem. It is a sign that your mind is gently disengaging from structure and returning to something more instinctive, more fluid. This is where sleep stories become less like stories and more like landscapes. You don't follow a landscape, you rest inside it. So let the edges blur. Let sentences pass through you without needing to land. The night is not asking for comprehension, only presence. Somewhere above, the stars continue to shine. They are doing nothing new, nothing impressive, just continuing. And continuity, at this hour, is deeply soothing, because continuity means you don't have to hold everything together. The universe is already doing that work. Long before humans named distances, long before they measured angles or traced orbits, the universe existed in this quiet completeness. It did not need to be understood to function. It did not need to be observed to continue. And that truth remains. You do not need to understand your life tonight. You do not need to resolve anything. You do not need to reach clarity. You are allowed to be incomplete in the most peaceful way, just as the astronomers eventually learned to accept uncertainty as part of knowing. You can accept not knowing as part of resting. The two are closer than they seem. Now, imagine the night sky again, but this time, don't look at it. Feel it. Feel the sense of openness above you. The way the darkness does not press down, but opens outward. This is not an empty darkness. It is a fertile one, full of slow movement, full of ancient light, full of rhythms that do not depend on your awareness. That kind of independence is comforting, because it means you can stop paying attention and nothing will collapse. The stars will not flicker out if you close your eyes. Earth will not stop turning. Time will not lose its place. Everything will continue gently. This is what allows sleep to feel safe. The body only lets go when it knows the world will keep going. And tonight, the world has proven itself steady, again and again. Cycle after cycle, orbit after orbit. The astronomer in our story has long since faded into history, not erased, just absorbed. His nights of patience are now part of a larger continuity, part of a tradition of quiet watching, quiet waiting, quiet trust. And Parsec, this small, unassuming word, continues to be used not because anyone insists on it, but because it fits naturally into the flow. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists where it is useful and disappears where it isn't. That is a beautiful way for anything to exist, including you. You do not need to be present everywhere. You do not need to be useful all the time. You are allowed to appear and disappear, to engage and rest, to think and drift. Now, if your mind wanders, let it. If it clings, let it. There is no wrong way to be here. Sleep is not a destination you must reach. It is a state you allow. And allowing is always easier than forcing. You may notice that your breathing has become quieter, less deliberate, more automatic. That's good. It means the body is taking over. It knows what to do next. You don't need to supervise it. The story will continue to speak softly, but it no longer expects you to listen closely. You can let the words become background, like wind in trees, like waves on a distant shore, like the hum of the universe itself. Think of all the nights that came before this one, nights you don't remember falling asleep, nights that carried you gently from wakefulness into rest without ceremony. This night is no different. It does not need to be special. It only needs to be kind. And it already is. If any lingering thoughts remain unfinished conversations, unresolved plans, imagine them as stars, too. They are far away. They are not approaching you. They can remain exactly where they are until morning, or longer. You do not need them now. The night is not for solving. It is for settling. The universe understands this. That is why so much of it moves slowly. That is why distances are so vast. That is why light takes its time. Because slowness creates stability, and stability creates safety. Now, imagine lying beneath a sky so large that it makes urgency feel unnecessary. A sky that does not care what time it is. A sky that does not measure your worth. A sky that simply exists and lets you exist beneath it. This is the sky humans have always slept under, even when roofs intervened, even when lights dimmed the stars. The relationship remains. Your body remembers it. That memory is older than language, older than measurement, older than stories. It lives in the way your muscles relax in darkness, in the way your eyes grow heavy, in the way thought dissolves into sensation. Let that memory do its work. You don't need to help it. As this part of the story nears its end, the words themselves will begin to thin. Sentences will shorten. Images will soften. This is intentional. Stories, like people, need to know when to step aside. And now, the night is ready to take over. If you are still awake, you may not be for much longer. If you are already drifting, these words may reach you only faintly. That's perfect. That means everything is happening exactly as it should. In the next and final parts, there will be no new ideas, no new discoveries, only the gradual fading of voice into silence, into rest. For now, let go of following, let go of understanding, let go of holding on. The universe is wide enough to hold you without effort, and the night is already doing so. By now, the night has grown very still, not silent, never silent, but softened, as if every sound has learned how to arrive without edges. Even the space between sounds feels gentle. Even pauses feel full. If you're listening, you may notice that you're no longer waiting for the next idea. You're simply here. And that is exactly where this part of the story lives. In the here that doesn't ask questions. In the now that doesn't rush forward. In the slow orbit of rest. Imagine, for a moment, the Earth from far away. Not as a globe with borders and names, but as a quiet sphere moving through darkness. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't hesitate. It follows a path that has been traced countless times before. Guided by a balance so gentle and so precise that it rarely draws attention to itself. This orbit is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself, and yet everything depends on it. Seasons change because of it. Nights arrive because of it, and sleep becomes possible because of it. You are resting tonight because something vast is moving slowly and reliably beneath you. That realization can feel strangely intimate, because it means rest is not just a personal experience, it is a shared one. The entire planet is participating. As Earth moves, stars appear to shift. Not much, just enough. Enough to reveal depth, enough to reveal distance, enough to remind us that stillness and motion are not opposites. They coexist, and so do wakefulness and sleep. You may still be aware, still listening, still breathing, and yet something deeper has already begun to drift. This is not something to analyze, it is something to trust. The astronomers who first noticed these tiny stellar shifts had to trust their observations. They had to trust that what they were seeing so small, so easy to doubt, was real. And that trust came not from certainty, but from repetition, from returning night after night, from letting patterns reveal themselves slowly. Sleep works the same way. You don't fall asleep by deciding to. You fall asleep by returning to rest again and again, until the body recognizes the pattern. And tonight, you are doing that, returning to breath, returning to stillness, returning to the quiet orbit of the night. The word parsec hardly matters anymore. It has done its job. It brought us to a sense of scale. It helped us feel the patience of the universe. Now it can rest too. Stories, like measurements, are tools. They are meant to be set down when they are no longer needed. And now, this story is becoming lighter, less solid, more like a presence than a narrative. If you find yourself slipping in and out of attention, hearing a sentence here, missing one there that is exactly right, that's how the edges of consciousness soften. Not abruptly, but kindly. Let your attention do what it wants. Let it wander. Let it blur. There is nothing here you need to catch. Nothing you need to remember. Nothing you need to hold. Now imagine lying beneath a sky that does not end. A sky without labels, without distances, without measurement, just darkness and light, just openness. This is the sky the body recognizes best. The sky before explanation, the sky before effort. And under that sky, humans have slept for tens of thousands of years. They slept without knowing how far the stars were, without knowing their names, without knowing what lay beyond them. And still, they slept, because sleep does not require understanding. It requires safety, and safety does not come from knowledge alone. It comes from rhythm, from repetition, from the quiet proof that nothing terrible happens when you close your eyes. The night has given you that proof many times before. It is giving it to you again now. Notice how your body feels heavier, but not uncomfortable. Notice how thoughts feel less gripping, more like passing impressions. Notice how effort is no longer necessary. This is the slow orbit taking hold, the orbit of rest. You don't need to follow it. You're already inside it. Somewhere far above, stars continue to shine. They do not know you are listening. They do not know you are resting. And yet, their steadiness reaches you anyway. That is the quiet miracle of the universe. It supports without awareness. It holds without intention. It continues without demand, and you, too, are allowed to continue without effort. If any part of you still feels alert, still holding on, let it hold. There is no conflict here. Wakefulness and sleep can overlap for a while. Just like dusk and night, just like night and dawn, transitions are gentle when they are allowed to be. Now imagine the slow movement of light again. Light leaving a star, traveling, 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 not knowing where it will end, and eventually arriving quietly, without announcement. This is how rest arrives, too. You don't notice the exact moment it begins. You only notice that you are already inside it, and perhaps you already are. This story will continue to speak, but it no longer needs your attention. You can let the words wash over you, or drift past you, or fade completely. All outcomes are welcome. If you awaken briefly later, the night will still be here. If you sleep through until morning, the universe will still be moving. Nothing is waiting for you to manage it. Nothing will be lost if you let go now. You are allowed to rest, fully, gently, without justification. As we move toward the final part of this journey, there will be almost nothing left to say. Only a soft presence, only a quiet companionship, only the reassurance that you are not alone in this slowing, and you never have been. For now, stay inside the orbit, let the night carry you, and trust that sleep, like starlight, arrives in its own time. Now, there is very little left to do. The night has brought us as far as it needs to, not to a conclusion, not to an answer, but to a place where effort dissolves on its own. This is the place where stories loosen their grip, where words no longer need to explain themselves, where meaning becomes unnecessary, because feeling is enough. If you are still listening, you may feel as though you are floating just beneath the surface of sleep, not fully gone, not fully here. That gentle in-between is not a mistake. It is a resting place, and it has always existed, long before stories, long before science, long before the idea of measuring distance at all. Before anyone ever whispered the word parsec, the night already knew how to do this. It knew how to slow the body, how to quiet the mind, how to let the world feel large enough that personal worries could soften and stretch out until they no longer pressed so tightly against the heart. The universe never asked us to understand it before resting. It only asked us to exist beneath it. And tonight, you have done exactly that. You have existed, you have listened, you have allowed yourself to move from the sharp edges of the day into the rounded, forgiving shapes of night. Nothing more was required. The astronomers of our story, those quiet figures who watched the stars night after night, eventually learned this too. They learned that, after careful observation, after patience, after naming what could be named, there comes a moment when the best thing to do is to stop looking and simply be held by the sky. They went home, they slept, the stars continued, and the distances they measured remained exactly where they were, vast, patient, unconcerned. Parsec did not need guarding. The universe did not need supervision. Everything continued without effort. That realization, deep and wordless, is one of the greatest comforts the night can offer, because it tells you something very important. You do not have to keep watch tonight. You do not have to stay alert. You do not have to solve, plan, revisit, or prepare. The universe is wide enough to hold the world without your attention, and you are allowed to rest inside that truth. If thoughts still drift through your mind, let them. They are like distant stars present, but far away. They do not approach. They do not demand. They can remain exactly where they are until morning or longer. There is nothing you need to take with you into sleep. Not this story, not its ideas, not its images. Sleep does not ask for souvenirs. It asks only for permission. So give yourself that permission now, not dramatically, not decisively, just gently, like loosening your grip on something you no longer need to hold. Notice how your breathing continues without instruction, how your body remains supported without effort, how gravity does its quiet work faithfully, moment after moment. These are the same kinds of forces that guide planets, stars, and light across space. Reliable, unshowy, enough. You are aligned with them now, and alignment feels like peace. If sleep has already taken you, if these words are only half heard, or barely noticed, that is perfect. That means the night has done its work. And if you are still awake, resting in this softness, that is perfect too. The night is in no hurry. It will stay with you as long as you need. Before we fade completely into quiet, let me leave you with a few gentle thoughts, offered softly, like blankets laid one by one. The universe is not waiting for you to understand it. Time does not need to be managed tonight. Distance does not separate you from belonging. Rest is not something you earn. It is something you allow. And if, when morning comes, you remember nothing of this story, that will mean it worked, because the purpose was never memory. It was comfort. If this story brought you calm, you are welcome to leave a gentle comment for yourself, not for others, not for engagement, just a small marker of kindness in your own direction. And don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful nighttime journeys here on Why Is That Sleep Story. Here, no one rests alone. Every story is a soft lantern in the dark. Now, there is nothing left to listen for, nothing left to follow, nothing left to hold. The stars will keep their distances, the earth will keep its orbit, the night will keep its promise, and you are free to sleep.